Let's talk about the 9 different risk factors in someone who's being interrogated giving a false confession. My name is Veronica. I am a criminal defense attorney here in Los Angeles, and I help people who have been arrested put their criminal cases behind them so that they can enjoy their lives and their freedom. And again, in this video, we're going to be talking about the 9 risk factors that make it more likely for someone to give a false confession. Number 1 is context. So this can be many different things. This can be pressure on the police to solve a case. It can be the relationship between the victim and other suspects. It can even be, let's say it's a husband whose wife has just been killed and is being interrogated. It can be his own personal grief, his own personal feelings. So that's number 1, context. Number 2 is interrogation and custodial factors. So this is how terrible it is to be sitting in the room where they're interrogating you. How long have you been there? Have you been given food? Have you been given water? How uncomfortable is the chair that you're in? Are you handcuffed? How many times have they interrogated you so far? How much sleep did you get? You know, maybe they woke you up in the middle of the night, or you just been to bed and now it's 10 hours later and they're interrogating you. Number 3 is not understanding your Miranda rights or the police caution. So they'll read you your rights, but you just won't understand, okay, I actually, despite what else they say, I actually don't have to talk to the cops. They'll read you your rights, but then they act sometimes like it's a technicality, right? And like, okay, so we read you your rights, now tell me what happened. Right? And you have to actually invoke the right. So if you don't understand that, then you are prone to perhaps giving a false confession. Number 4 is being young. So, you know, if you're under 18, but even 18, 19, 20, depending on your life experience at that age, being young can cause you to give or is a risk factor in giving a false confession. Number 5 is your mindset, so the mindset of the suspect at the time. So actually this one is really interesting because innocence itself might be a risk factor. So maybe you've been there for hours and hours, you are hungry, you're thirsty, maybe they gave you some like shitty coffee, you are tired, you just want to get out of there, right? You just want to go home. And if you're innocent, you might figure, okay, well, if they're telling me, you know, they're talking about just tell us the truth, we know you did it, and then you can go home. If you're innocent, you may think, okay, you know what, I can tell them what they want, I can go home, and then of course, since I didn't do it, from there, they'll figure out that I didn't do it. And this one is like one of the scariest of all, I think, because I can imagine, you know, especially, you know, a young person, a grieving person, who's thinking, I just want to get the hell out of here. Being innocent and saying, yeah, I did it. Okay, I told you what you want to hear. Now can I go home? Figuring that, all right, well, they're going to match the forensic evidence and all that, and they'll see it wasn't me. They probably won't. They'll probably stop there. And that's a whole other video. But the CSI stuff that you see, LAPD is not doing that shit most of the time, and they're definitely not doing it to your benefit. If they think that they have enough evidence because you confessed, they're not looking for anything else. They're done. And don't get me started on the sheriff's department. Number 6 is physical and mental health problems. So perhaps you are in pain at the time. You have some kind of physical pain going on. Mental illness. So this one sadly is really common too, where you have anxiety, depression, you have phobias like claustrophobia and you're in a little room. If you're depressed, you may not be necessarily suicidal, but you may not have the self-preservation mindset that is needed to try to get past this interrogation. I don't know why my hand is glowing here in the sunset. You may kind of be like, fuck it, you know what? It doesn't matter anyway, right? If you have that, if you're feeling really depressed, if you've ever known somebody who is depressed or been depressed yourself, you can probably understand that some people have that kind of mindset, especially when so much pressure is being put on them by people who have been doing this for decades, and their whole job is to try to get you to say what they want you to say. It can be very difficult to stand up against that. Number 7 is developmental disorders. This one's pretty sad too. Intellectual disabilities, ADHD, autism, literacy problems. I mean, I have seen signed confessions by people who could not read. Now, how did that happen, right? They literally couldn't read what was in front of them, but this is why it's another risk factor. Number 8 is lack of access to prescribed medication while in custody. This is sad too. I mean, so if you, for example, are in pain and you would typically be on pain medicine, if you know that you have to take like even an antibiotic at a certain time and they're not giving it to you, whatever it may be, obviously there are more serious medications than those depending on what is going on there. And of course for mental health conditions too. You need that medicine and they are not giving it to you in custody while they're interrogating you almost all of the time. They're not giving it to you. And number 9 is a history of suffering from sexual abuse, violence, bullying, and other traumatic life events. So, I mean, there's sort of this, in all cases, it's not necessarily learned helplessness, but it's sort of like so much has been thrown at you and you've been so traumatized, and now you have, maybe you were beat up by a big dude, and now you have all these big dudes that are shouting at you, telling you, we know you did it, tell us the truth, and you may fold, right? Of course. Anyway, I mean, all of these are actually really sad, and what really bothers me is that, first of all, a lot of people think, well, I'm not going to confess to a crime I didn't commit, right? And maybe you don't have these risk factors, and maybe you wouldn't. I mean, I wouldn't because of the education that I have, obviously, and the experience in criminal defense. There's no way I would. But a lot of people who don't even have that think, yeah, I never would do that. And if somebody confesses, then they are surely guilty. And they may be right that they wouldn't do that, but that doesn't mean that if you confess, you are guilty. And the prosecutors and the cops, they hold up, if you confess, they hold this up as like a trophy. Like, we have a confession. Like, what the hell are you talking about, counsel? You want like a deal? You want us to dismiss this or reduce it? We have a signed confession here. Because they're not thinking about any of this, right? And sometimes you'll read the details of the confession, you'll see the other evidence, and you're like, that doesn't even make sense. Like, that couldn't possibly be true. It doesn't all go together, right? But they don't care about that. And like I mentioned earlier, once you confess, in most cases, the investigation pretty much ends. It's not like on TV. We do not have Sherlock Holmes here working for LAPD or for the sheriff's department. Not at all. Not at all. They are looking to convict. They are looking to find out who did it and close the case quickly. They're not looking to make sure that you for sure are guilty. No, it's up to your defense team, which can often be a court-appointed investigator, and it can be the public defender has their own investigators, unless you have a ton of money to hire your own private attorney plus a private investigator that's not court appointed. I mean, and it's us trying to get to the bottom of this when we don't have the resources that they have. So, I mean, by confessing, unfortunately, sometimes that stops the investigation and all they'll do is arrest you, and then there's a criminal case, and then, we're trying to go back and figure out, okay, what actually happened here, right? Anyway, I hope that this was helpful. If you do have an active criminal case in Los Angeles County, feel free to book a consultation with me down below. You can also find my phone number there.